Did the New York Knicks do enough this offseason? Going into this offseason, many expected the Knicks to make a big move to improve their roster, and although they did make some nice moves here and there, they didn't necessarily make that huge move that many were expecting. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm Juicy Sports, I make opinionative NBA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. I also want to quickly mention that I recently started up an MMA channel, and if you guys are interested in that, the link will be in the description. But anyways, let's get into it. I won't be the first to tell you that the Knicks have been struggling for a very long time, and it seemed like finally once they started to figure things out, at least somewhat during the 2020 season, where they were the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference, where they made the playoffs for the first time since 2013, things were finally starting to look up for them. But then fast forwarding to that year's playoffs, they ended up losing in the first round 4-1 against the Atlanta Hawks, and then this last season where people were expecting them to play off the season they had in 2020, they just completely collapsed and had such a disappointing season last year. And a lot of people felt as if the Knicks were all the way back to square one again, where they were just struggling and didn't have a direction they were going in. So thus, many people expected the Knicks to make a significant move during this year's offseason to finally try to improve their roster and finally try to bring their roster in a certain direction to build for the future. And it seemed like the trade that made the most sense to most Knicks fans and also to the Knicks organization was bringing in a guy in Donovan Mitchell, who is a proven star in the NBA for some time, and bringing in a player of the caliber of Donovan would at the very least bring the Knicks to the playoffs, at least presumably. And once it seemed pretty apparent that the Knicks had the best offer and no other team was truly in the running for him, it just seemed like it was a matter of time, and it was when, not if. But of course, in typical Knicks fashion, the Knicks didn't even end up getting Donovan, as he did end up getting traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers, and the Knicks had to settle for the moves they made earlier on in that offseason, which is some supplementary moves, but the main move that they did make was bringing in Jalen Brunson. So now the question of the video is, did the Knicks actually do enough during this offseason, or did they squander a big opportunity to improve the roster? Now I feel like whatever camp that you fall into, whether you think the Knicks did enough this offseason or whether you think they didn't do enough, really comes down to where you see the Knicks as a team currently. If you think that the young players that the Knicks have on their roster currently could eventually turn into a championship contender in the long-term future, then you probably think that the Knicks did enough this offseason, because they basically kept their young core intact while also at the same time bringing in a much needed point guard in Jalen Brunson. And although they didn't necessarily make a huge move this offseason, they didn't necessarily need to, due to the fact that they already have their young core established. But if you think the Knicks didn't do enough this offseason, you're probably in the camp of thinking that the Knicks don't have the right players at this point to compete for a championship in the long-term future, and you would much rather see the Knicks trade away some of their young pieces in order to bring in a star or a superstar to New York. Because the Knicks have had a history of not willing to give up some of their younger guys in return for a superstar that really bit them in the backside. A couple seasons back, when the Knicks still had Kevin Knox, it was reported that the New Orleans Pelicans were willing to trade away Anthony Davis to New York when Anthony Davis requested a trade out of New Orleans in exchange for Kevin Knox and a bunch of other young players on the Knicks. And obviously at this point it's pretty clear that Kevin Knox didn't pan out to be the player that most people thought he would be. He's not even currently on the Knicks, and he's barely even getting any playing time in the NBA as a whole. So it's pretty clear that the Knicks' unwillingness to give up a guy like Kevin Knox really cost them an opportunity to pick up a player like Anthony Davis. So maybe you're a person who really saw that horrific mistake that the Knicks made in the past, and you really didn't want to see them make that same mistake again, so you would have liked to see the Knicks trade away some of their younger guys in exchange for a star like Donovan Mitchell. Now in my personal opinion, I kind of land in between both camps. I do think that the Knicks have some nice young talent on their roster, but at the same time, I do feel as if the Knicks should have maybe done a little bit more and should have went a little bit deeper in the Donovan Mitchell trade market. Now obviously the Cleveland Cavaliers did end up giving up a decent amount, but I feel like if I were the Knicks, I would have definitely been willing to give up a package consisting of Obi Toppin, Cam Reddish, maybe even Emmanuel Quickley, alongside with 3 or 4 first first round picks in exchange for Donovan. And it seemed like the Knicks were unwilling to do that. Now obviously they were negotiating, and maybe in the end they would have gotten there if it was just a one-team race, but it kind of seemed like the Cavs just came out of nowhere and just took the deal from the Knicks. But as I said, if I were at the negotiating table, I definitely would have been willing to make a deal similar to that I just mentioned. The one thing that I will say though is I definitely would not have been willing to trade away RJ Barrett, which it seemed like the Knicks weren't willing to deal until there were some reports that came out saying that they were somewhat willing to deal him. I'm not necessarily sure which reports are real or which reports were not, but in my opinion, I did find it somewhat surprising that it seemed like the Knicks were even thinking about trading away RJ Barrett, because at that point, I feel like that doesn't really make much sense. If you're trading away RJ Barrett in order to bring in a guy in Donovan Mitchell, yeah, you're definitely going to be better in the short term. You're probably going to be a playoff team, hopefully. But if you're truly trying to build for a championship contender in the long-term future, you're going to need more than one guy. So I feel like trading away that guy in RJ Barrett, who has proven, at least to me personally, that he has a lot of talent and a lot of potential going forward, in exchange for Donovan, I just felt like that made no sense. So I definitely would not have been willing to deal RJ Barrett. But at this point, it's kind of over and done with, and it is what it is. It seems like the Knicks are just willing to run back basically the same team that they had last year, which they did definitely have some success with towards the tail end of the season last year with some of their younger guys, while also at the same time bringing in a much needed point guard piece in Jalen Brunson, who in my opinion, I feel as if that move is somewhat going under the radar at this point, solely due to the fact that most people thought that the Knicks were supposed to get Donovan Mitchell, and the fact that they didn't get him kind of just made every Knicks fan and a lot of fans around the NBA disappointed, and they feel as if the Knicks offseason was a failure. But in my opinion, I definitely think the Knicks could be a decent team this next season if Julius Randle could just play a little bit better than he played last year, or if the Knicks are able to figure out a way to trade away Julius somehow. I really think the Knicks could get right back on track to where they were in the 2020 season. Now, I'm not necessarily saying I think they would be the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference, because I definitely do not, but I at the same time wouldn't necessarily be completely shocked if the Knicks were able to make the playoffs this season. I think bringing in a true point guard in Jalen Brunson that can not only help you on the scoring side, but also could really facilitate for a lot of these guys, especially Julius Randle, would really just help out a lot of these players. Because last season and in the past, it seemed like Julius Randle was taking the ball up the court way too much and was trying to either create for himself or create for others, and at that power forward position, it's just not going to work all that much. So bringing in that point guard in Jalen will benefit a player like Julius significantly, while also at the same time just benefiting everybody else on the roster as well. So I definitely am very excited to see how Jalen fits in with this roster, and how a lot of these other younger players like Obi Toppin, Emmanuel Quickley, Cam Reddish, Quentin Grimes, Mitchell Robinson, all those other young players improve their games as well this next season, because I definitely am expecting them all to improve their games somewhat. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think the New York Knicks did enough this offseason, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy it, check one of these 2 videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out guys.